Hello and welcome. It's time for Ghosts Along the Cumberland. Including death beliefs, folk beliefs associated with the dead, and ghost narratives. All selected readings from the William Lynwood Montell book entitled Ghosts Along the Cumberland. Always told us kids never to take a dare to do anything. She told us of this girl that her mother told her about who took a dare to go into this graveyard at midnight. There was this curse or something that would cause you something to happen to you. This girl took the dare and went to the graveyard at midnight. She was supposed to stick a fork in a grave, but when she stuck the fork in the grave, she caught her dress with the fork. When she started to stand up, she thought something had a hold of her dress. She fell over dead. This is why Mother always told us kids never to take a dare to do something. There was a man who was afraid of the dead. A bunch of fellas or men made it up to really scare him. They told him that this man had died and wanted him to go with them to sit up. One of the men was going to play dead. All the men, except the one that was afraid, left the room. The one that was left turned his back on the dead man. As he turned around, the man that was playing dead had raised up to a sitting position. This frightened the other man, who grabbed a nearby poker and began beating what he thought was a corpse. He almost killed the man. The next morning, the other man apologized for leaving him alone. He said, "That man you all left me with wasn't dead, but by hell, he's dead now." Well, this was the way the story goes. Many long years ago, it is so far back that people never had, they didn't even have coal oil. Only lights they had was candles. And these were very wealthy people. They had built them a fine house and they entertained a lot. Had big balls and things and these big chandeliers with candles in them and everything. Except one night they was having a big ball and everyone had lots of music and people was all dancing and having fun, you know. And one fella come in and says, "You all heard about that murder just across the Tennessee line?" And they says, "No, what?" "Well," says, "there's a young girl murdered down there and the fella got away though." Said, "They haven't been able to, well, they're still searching for him, but they haven't found him yet." Said they knew who killed her, but said they hadn't been able to find him. And so someone said, "Why, Lord, no." Said, "He's hiding out somewheres. And see, it's not far from here to the Tennessee line, you know." And says, "He might be here somewhere in Kentucky." Someone else spoke up and said, "He might be in this very house, no telling." Says he's hiding somewhere. Nobody hasn't found him yet. And they all got to joking about it. And then someone says, the bravest girl here will take a candle and go upstairs and looking under the bed. And didn't any of them want to do it? The girl said, oh no, no, no. But Mr. Bell, that was the name of the people, came in with a lighted candle in his hand, says, there has never been a bell yet that was a coward. So take this candle and go upstairs and look under the bed. So said she was a shaken, but she took the candle like her father told her and went upstairs. And when she stooped over and looked under the bed, there he laid looking out at her. Well, she screamed and fainted. And afterwards they knew. Of course, they all, that day, in age, people started to go somewhere. They grabbed a candle to go by. They come with more candles. You know, when they heard her scream and said afterwards, they knew she had dropped her candle on the bed, was the way the house caught a fire. But nobody noticed it then. They took her downstairs and bathed her face and brought her to, you know, and took the man and got a rope and tied him up in the basement and went on then with, after a while, after they all talked a while, went on with their dancing and music till about daylight. Long toward morning, why, the first thing they knew of the fire, you see, they was making so much racket, all the dancing and music and everything, they didn't hear it overhead. First they'd know the ceiling was falling in on them. The house was done too far to save. The whole top of it had done burnt up, you know. And everybody commenced getting out then to save themselves. And they forgot all about the man until the house was caving in on him and they heard him a moaning and a groaning. And it was too late to get him then, 'cause it had all done caved in on him. And I always tell the children there was no difference anyway, 'cause he'd have been hung anyhow, you know. 'Cause he was the man that killed that girl. And he wouldn't have, there'd have been no escape for him. But they said built it back. Now this was a frame house that they burnt down. They built back a fine brick house. They was wealthy people and so perhaps had insurance, I don't know. I guess they had insurance in that day and time. But anyway, they was rich. They was able to build back another big fine brick house. But said every night at the same time that fellow burned up in that basement, they could hear him moaning and groaning under the house. They sold it, and it was sold several times. And everybody declared they heard that fella down there and groaning in the basement. So then finally the community went together, and the Christian people, and bought the old building and tore it down and built a fine big church out of it. But they said they still could hear the man under the church groaning every night. That's how that story goes. Back in the early 1900s, there was a hill near my grandfather's home. As you ride by on horseback, as my granddad usually did, you could hear the sweet music of the heavenly choir singing sweet songs of long ago. Today, the hill still got the same name. You can ask anyone in the community about that hill, and they will give you the name, the Haunted Hill. And they still say if you go in there by night, and the wind is just right, you can hear them singing.
How precious did that grace appear.
How precious the grace, how
first believed.
Once there was this old mountaineer up around Bell or Harlan or somewhere up in there, and his wife died. Well, him and some of the neighbors made a coffin and laid her out in it. And they was taking her to the cemetery to bury her. They were taking her in an old road wagon, and they hit a bump in the road. So she comes around and sits up in the coffin. So there was nothing else to do but to take her home again. Well, about 2 or 3 weeks later, she dies again. And they're taking her back the same as before. Well, they come to a rough place again. So the old man tells the driver, slow down, take it easy. Remember what happened here last time. Going down the highway on a motorcycle. It was raining a little. He overtook a girl that was walking. She was thin looking, and so he stopped and asked her if there was something he could do for her. She said that she'd like to have a ride down the road a few miles. She didn't have on a coat, so he took off his jacket and let her have it. It was raining. He went down the road a few miles and he drove up to a farmhouse. And she told him that that was the place, but she wanted off. She seemed to be frightened and ran in the house upstairs. He forgot to ask for his new jacket. He went on where he was going and stayed all night somewheres. He got to thinking about his jacket. So he went back to the place where he left the girl. A woman came to the door and he asked about the girl and described her. And also asked about his jacket. She said, "Mister, you just described my girl exactly." But she says, she's been dead 7 years. She told him, though, she would take him to the cemetery and show him the tombstone. And when they got there hung his jacket on the tombstone. This story starts one morning when a man found a woman dead in her bed. The man called the parents of this woman and told them what had happened. The parents rushed over to see their daughter because they just could not believe that she was dead. But when they got there, they indeed saw that she was dead. They called the funeral director and made arrangements for the funeral. He went and got the body and prepared it for the funeral. The parents of this woman who died had a beautiful ring that they put in the casket the day she was buried. The family was real poor and couldn't pay the funeral director for her services. A year or so later, the family found out that the ring that they had buried with their daughter was worth a lot of money, would make them rich. So they dug up the grave and opened the casket and saw that their girl had turned over on her stomach and pulled the hair out of her head. I heard another story about a girl that died. She had a valuable ring, one which could not be removed. A Negro man went that night and opened the grave. He started to cut off the finger, and the girl started to moan. She sat up in the grave and asked where she was and to take her home. The man was so scared, but he finally promised, and he would return her to her family, which he did. Mom always said our house must have been haunted with the ghost of a person who had been killed at our place a long time ago. For every time it would rain, there would be a spot just outside our door that would turn as red as blood, and the rain mixed with it was blood. When it stopped raining, the blood would go away.
This is Martin Young and Corbett Grigsby up in Hazard, Kentucky, with Rocky Island. Corner Rocky Island, oh honey ho, see my candy darling, you know I'm bound to go. You go ride every horse and I go ride a roll. You get there before I do, leave my girl alone. Corner Rocky Island, oh,
This woman had several children, and she was expecting another. And her other children had all gotten up to a pretty good size. The youngest boy was about 6 years old. So one night, she let him sit up a little longer than the others. All at once, the little boy screamed, "Look, Mother, there's a little black girl looking in the window." His mother looked, but she didn't see anything. So she told him that there wasn't anything there. He said, "Yes, there was," and he was very scared, and he even began to cry. The mother thought that he was just imagining things. In due course, the baby was born, and it turned out to be the prettiest child she had. It was a baby girl, and she named her Laura May. She was a very smart child. One day, when she was about 4 years old, the children were out playing. It was an early fall day, and the leaves were already falling. They had raked the leaves into a pile out back, and the mother burned the leaves. She thought the fire was out, but actually there was a few small embers left. When the mother went back into the house, the children made a game of running back and forth through the ashes. The little girl stepped on a hot coal, and it flew up and set her dress afire, and she was burned to death. The whole family was heartbroken, especially the mother. At the funeral, a couple of days later, they took the boy up to see her for the last time. The little girl's face had been blackened in the fire. When he looked into the casket, he said, "Oh, Mommy, that's not Laura May. It's that little black girl I saw looking into the window." There is an old haunted house in the southern portion of Barron County near the Austin community. It is said that an old woman whose name was Stevens starved to death while living alone there. When she was dying, someone gave her a piece of cornbread. She grabbed it and ate it like she was starving. The old lady was laid to rest in a nearby graveyard, but her haunt continues to plague the old house as rattling dishes and strange noises. The hungry supernatural creature was finally quieted by a subsequent family of residents who moved in after others had been frightened away. "Go ahead and eat all you want, Miss Stevens," they would say to her as she moved about the kitchen, foraging through the dishes and utensils. Eventually, the noises ceased as the appeased spirit returned to the graveyard. The massive stone fireplace was the center of family life in Pioneer, Kentucky. In Lincoln County, in many respects the gateway to the West, a well-to-do family built a new house containing such a chimney, a large hand-hewn stone affair. When the family occupied their new home, they began to notice something odd about the fireplace. It seems that when the firewood died down at night and the embers had been banked for the night, a strange light would appear and shine in the darkness. Investigations revealed that it was not something in or on any of the stones. The family became terribly frightened as time went on, but had not been willing to stay in the room with the light. They employed a man to come and watch the light and attempt to figure out what was causing it. The man became frightened and ran away without getting to the source of the ghostly light. Two other men were brought in to sit as a pair and study the light when it appeared. That night, the light came forth, and soon afterwards, the form of a woman materialized on the hearth before their very eyes. They talked with the troubled creature and learned that the fireplace had been over 2 graves. The people who owned the house tore away the fireplace and removed the skeletal remains from the graves and buried them in a nearby undisturbed spot. From that time forward, the light has not been seen in the big fireplace. Several years ago, a family was traveling towards Somerset late one night on the start of their vacation. As they started down a long hill, the car went out of control and hit the bridge at the bottom of the hill. It killed every person in the car and was said to have been the bloodiest wreck to ever occur in that area. It is now reported, and every time to be the truth, that when a person is driving down this road, being alone, and reaches the top of the hill, the door on the passenger side will open, and there will be a figure of a bloody man on the seat. You can see him plainly, but cannot touch him. As you cross the bridge, the man will then open the door and get out. Some people have sworn to have blood spots on the seats of their cars.
Charlie's sweet and Charlie's neat and Charlie, he's a dandy. Charlie, he's a macho man, he feeds the girl on candy. Oh, Lordy, that's an old one now, sir. You have got older there. That really is older.
This is a Barren County story. It would have been somewhere in around 88, in eastern Pennyrile community. Somewhere in that county in there. It was sometime about the time of the Civil War or prior. A young couple were engaged, and she had her wedding dress made. She contracted something, typhoid I guess, and died. Instead of getting married, she was buried on her wedding day. And they buried her in her wedding dress. The boy she was to have married went home with her parents after the funeral. It was coming up a storm and he went back home after supper. He had to pass the church on the way. By the time he got to the church, It was storming and doing so bad, he dashed in to get out of it. Just as he went in the door, there came a real bright flash, and he saw something sitting down the aisle on the front seat. He just thought someone had already taken shelter in the church, and he would go down and talk with them. As he got almost there, another flash came, and he saw the girl he was to have married sitting there. It almost scared him out of his mind, and he turned and started to run. Just as he started to go out the door, hands grabbed him, and someone stuck a gun in his back. Grave robbers had come and stolen the body, but before they could get away, this big storm come up. They carried her into the church with them and propped her up in the front seat. They wouldn't let him leave until he promised he'd never tell what happened. But he did tell. The old house across the road from my place is said to be haunted. No one has lived in that old house since Jimmy Gray's daughter was killed there several years ago. She was found stone dead, sitting at her piano by one of the neighbors. Jimmy Gray is never found or heard from around here after her death. It is said that he killed her while she was playing the piano. The neighbors buried her behind the old Gray house. Now every night at 12 o'clock, the old piano can be heard playing in the night. People reckon it is her ghost coming back to finish the song she was playing. Two people say the house is haunted because one night some people were traveling from Liberty to McKinney and they saw two figures leaving the old house. The ghost darted across the road in front of the travelers and disappeared on the other side. This has been Ghosts Along the Cumberland. Selected readings from the William Lynwood Montell book entitled Ghosts Along the Cumberland.